Hello and welcome back to another episode of LMScast. My name is Chris Badgett, and today we're joined by a special guest, Scott Magdalein from Trained Up. Thanks for coming on the show, Scott.
Thank you for having me again, Chris.
It's good to have you back on the show. For those of you who haven't seen or heard Scott before, we did an episode on SEO many episodes back. Scott has a lot of wisdom in that area, and that was a really good, tactical, full of lots of tips kind of episode. So go look that up if you're digging this conversation. In this episode, we're going to get more into what Scott's teaching business is, some issues he's facing as an entrepreneur in the teaching space, and just general marketing issues and how he's working through them. And we're going to talk a little bit about the digital nomad remote lifestyle, because Scott is actually coming to us on a boat today. We'll end with that, but just to kind of plant the seed, you're on a boat. Where are you right now?
We're in the northern Bahamas in a place in the Abacos area, anchored off an island called Elbow Key.
Elbow Key. Awesome. Yeah. So somewhere down there below Florida, out there somewhere. Yeah. But we'll come back to that in a little bit. Scott and I met at a business mastermind conference, and, we're both in the learning space and had a lot in common. And, it was really good it's been great getting to know Scott. But for those out there that don't know who you are, what is Trained Up, your learning platform, all about? Like, what is it?
Trained Up is a training platform and library it's a video library, training content that churches can use to train their volunteers. And so we provide both a very simple training platform that's course-based, but it's very simple course-based. And then that's baked into, kind of coupled with video courses that we make and provide for the churches to use out of the box. And also our part of our training platform allows churches or ministry leaders to create, upload, record with their webcam right to their training account, to be able to create their own video training as well.
That's really awesome. And just to kind of restate it and make it super clear to the listener, Scott has a training platform that he gives access to solve a very specific problem in the church industry. And it comes with a catalog of courses, and people can also upload their own courses into the system. What problem are you trying to solve with Trained Up?
It's a very specific problem, the problem of untrained volunteers in churches, where you have a church full of people who are trying to serve and want to help out on a Sunday morning or during the week or whatever. But those people, the jobs that they have to do typically they're like week-to-week job, so their day-to-day job. Like, you might be a janitor in a school, but on Sunday morning you're changing diapers in a preschool room. And so there's some training that needs to go along to get the job done well, and also for liability reasons to know what not to do with a room full of preschoolers. Like, don't feed them all peanut butter sandwiches. Like, you can't do that kind of stuff. So just help churches to be able to do really thorough training without having to, and kind of overcoming some of the existing obstacles to volunteer training in churches right now.
That's really awesome. I love that. I think that's such a pro way to go about things, to really start with the problem. Not necessarily, I know you're trying to build a business around this and all this, but you're really starting with solving a specific problem out there in the world for in a specific place, like for church organizations who have volunteers. And what are some other just kind of niche scenarios that emerge in the volunteer space? Besides, it sounds like, there's things that some people may not have thought about. Like, well, if you have a volunteer scenario and there's, small children involved, there's some basics that some people know, especially if they're not parents. What else? What are some other common issues?
Yeah, so another one would be adult, and most of this is volunteer training for adult volunteers that work in various different roles of volunteer roles in the church. So, another one might be youth ministry, or working with like middle school and high schoolers. So you have like a handful of adults that say they're going to volunteer to be like good influences and work with the youth in the church, and that's great. There's also a lot of risk that comes along with having untrained adults working with a bunch of other people's kids that are middle school and high school. And so there's liability issues with alone time with an adult and a teenager. So like me to make sure you train them how to not be alone with students, how to recognize risky behavior. So we do a lot of training on recognizing self-harm behavior or risky behavior, bullying behavior, recognizing depression kind of characteristics or traits, signals. So we do training, we produce training for churches to be able to, train on those specific things for their volunteers. Another one might be that we focus on is adults who lead groups of discussion groups, which is not a typical kind of skill that you might learn out in the working world. But on a weekly basis, adults have to sit around on a regular basis, sit around and have lead a discussion about a Bible topic. And that's not typically a thing that we do in our day-to-day life. And so those people that lead those discussion groups, and almost 100% of those people are not like trained Bible teachers at some seminary. And so they need some training on how to lead those Bible discussions. And so we also offer training content about that.
That's awesome. So there's all these layers of problems, like as training volunteers who are then put in situations where there might be problems or challenges they need to overcome.
Yeah.
And then what problem are you trying to solve specifically with technology? Like, couldn't you, you could do in-person volunteer training, right? Like, why did you build Trained Up?
You could if you wanted to, Chris. I mean, No, yeah, actually churches for decades have done in-person volunteer training. Volunteer training itself is not really anything new in churches. There's some common problems that we're trying to help them overcome, which is low attendance at volunteer training meetings. And so since you have low attendance, churches that really care about it tend to increase the frequency of meetings to get everybody there. But then you got like a calendar stacked full of volunteer training meetings you have to go to, which nobody wants to go to a training a meeting. That's then the church tries to make it fun. They try to have food, and then it starts to get expensive, and still you don't get a lot of attendance at volunteer training meetings. And even with that, you don't know who was there and wasn't there, who was paying attention, who got pulled out on a phone call, and so they missed something critical. And so not only is it difficult to get a full coverage of training for all your volunteers, especially as your church grows, but also the accountability level of knowing who is trained and who's not trained and who understands the really core principles that they need to know. So
that's incredible. I just love how specific and niche down your topic here and your platform and the design of it all is for, and the content itself. That's wonderful. Well, Let's talk a little bit. Go ahead. You got another point?
I was just going to say the concept of, so a lot of in the teaching space and the learning space, it's a lot of like an individual entrepreneur creating content or creating training for an end user to train that person. And so like me, I might create a course and sell it to a learner, which is good. And there's a ton of that's needed. There's a huge niche that's not being served. And this is the niche that we're serving. We're specifically serving this in the church space, that is training the people inside of organizations and selling that training to make training within that organization easier. So there's a whole niche. We've debated internally about which niche we really want to focus on. We feel passionate about churches and church volunteer training. It's something that me and my team, we love and we care about deeply. But there's, even just in volunteer training, there's a whole space of nonprofit volunteer training that's completely underserved. Not just with like a platform for it from a tech perspective, but also from a content perspective, being able to give company or organizations like Habitat for Humanity or Make-A-Wish or anything that might any soup kitchen in any city in America where there's training that needs to happen before they show up for quality reasons, to make sure that the volunteers are doing a good job, but also for liability reasons. And so volunteer training is a much bigger problem to solve, and can be solved from a teaching entrepreneurial perspective outside of the church realm. And then of course there's the whole training and teaching inside of companies and employee training. That's being solved by some large enterprise focused companies. But there's a huge space that's an opportunity to be able to teach basic skills to employees inside of small businesses. That's just not being served well by other companies out there. So
awesome. Well, one more question before we shift into kind of what's going on in your world on the marketing side and the customer segmentation side. How did you come up with this concept, which I think is brilliant, of I'm going to have some general training that's going to be good for everybody, but then allow in their accounts to start uploading their own courses too that are unique to them? Where did that idea come from? That's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's actually just me over the last 2 years of running Trained Up and learning what my customers need. We've been serving churches with training software for a couple of years, and realizing that for somebody who is not a big portion of their time committed to producing training content, it's not easy to work with an LMS. And so, like you guys, well, a great Lifter LMS is a great tool. But for somebody who it's like just kind of a small piece of what they do, setting up a learning management system and then thinking about course design and thinking about production and thinking about,
it's a lot.
It's a big piece.
Yeah.
And so we did a couple of things. We realized that it was a big hurdle for our customers, for churches on our platform to think through that. So we did two things. We super simplified. We have this new version that just came out last month. Super simplified the entire learning building, the building phase down to its absolute most simple core thing, where you have a topic you want to teach. You teach the one topic and you add a couple of questions, and that's it. There's no scoring system. There's no bells and whistles at all. And then once your volunteers go in, they watch the video and they answer a couple of questions, and that's it. And so we moved away from like curriculum design concept and moved into, you teach a topic and you ask a couple of questions about the thing you taught. So we made that much easier for them. And also we built in some tools to make it easy to just record with your webcam, so they don't have to set up like an extra separate camera and then do the video production and then import and upload and all that stuff. So we made that just like click a button, record it, and click save, and it's done. And then the other side is, there's 40,000, 50,000 churches just in America that all pretty much do the same thing on Sunday mornings. Like you go to a church and there's a church service and there's a guy that preaches and there's some music and your kids go over here to this thing and there's some volunteers that help the kids learn Bible verses or whatever, and they play games. And then there's some older kids go up to the youth room upstairs and they play games and they learn Bible. And so it's very similar across all these churches. And so standard training is just an obvious thing to be able to provide. If somebody needs to learn how to change a diaper in this church, and they also need to learn how to change a diaper in that church. And why would we putting the burden on all these churches to create redundant training? Why can't we just do it for them? Kind of thing. So
that's awesome. That's really interesting, just from the society level, where, kind of in the past, it was like from the top and telling people what to do. And now that everything's democratized and distributed and everybody's a publisher, you're kind of like pulling back a little bit, like, well, you don't actually have to do it all. Like, here's some tools to do that. And you can also be a publisher and do it too. That's really brilliant. Well, if we look at I like to say, like, when you need to make a decision about, building a course or creating a learning platform, it's all about focusing on the end user or the end, like follow the value chain all the way down. And if that, in most cases, the student wins, everybody wins. In your case, it's even more complex because, it's like that baby who needs the diaper changed. It's that, that kid at church who needs to, just have a good experience with the volunteer or whatever. And then it goes to the volunteer, and then it goes to the trainer of the volunteer. And then it goes to the person that provides the training to the volunteer. And then it goes to, who is the person that actually buys the training for the volunteer? And then, eventually it ends up at trainedup.church where you guys are at. But like, if we follow that back, like, who is your customer and what has been your experience as a platform owner? I know you care about solving these problems that are multi-layered, but what's your experience like around, the person making the buying decision and the, versus the people who actually use it versus the people who first hear about it, or how does it work?
Yeah, it's much more complicated than just like selling a course to a person who's going to watch the video and, get value out of it. For us, solving the problem for the church is more than just providing good content or like a good user interface. We have to be able to solve. So let's say Joe Blow. Joe Blow is a youth pastor, and he's got 15 volunteers. He needs to keep them, like, anytime he adds a new volunteer, that person has to be trained up really fast, which is why we call the company Trained Up. Person needs to be trained up and ready to go within a week or so. And he also has like a rank of volunteers that he needs to kind of keep up to speed on best practices and like policies and stuff like that. So, but Joe works within the context of a larger organization. And so we need to serve Joe and help him train his volunteers. But Joe, his reality is that he also interfaces with other ministers within his church. He also has kind of an upline where he also kind of reports to maybe the executive pastor or the senior pastor in his church. And that senior pastor, even at that, has accountability back through to the congregation when the congregation usually keeps the pastor accountable, doing good ministry, that sort of thing. And so there's a lot of levels of complexity with Joe's situation. So for us to serve Joe well, we have to figure out how do we get the software to Joe and the content to Joe in a way that Joe can use it and have good trained volunteers, but also help him navigate the complexity of adopting new software in the context of his organizational realities.
So onboarding, the onboarding into the system there's
sure.
that too.
Well,
yeah.
There's the onboarding. Yeah, sure. So we actually are in the process right now of completely not completely redoing, but of redesigning how we sell the software.
Let me jump in and ask you a question there, because if you do that, which is awesome, it's all about iteration and continuous improvement. Usually that means you made some assumptions that weren't correct, or at least were suboptimal. What was the earlier thinking?
Okay. All right. Yeah. Our assumption before was that we can sell at a simple one flat rate and sell it to a church. And the church as a whole, all the staff in the church, all the ministers in the church would purchase it and all the ministers would use it. That's ideal. Like the church would all say all together, yes, we decide that we're going to use this software. But the reality is, like, it's not the staff that's using the software. It's 2 or 3 volunteer trainers, people that are responsible for their own volunteers within that staff. So you might have staff of 6 or 7 people in that church, but you have the youth pastor and the children's pastor and maybe like the small group / Sunday school kind of director person. And those are the 3 people who do the most volunteer training. But we were assuming that the whole church would purchase it, which was a bad assumption. So we're actually shifting and running completely new Facebook ads and changing our pricing and changing our new landing pages, all geared toward, instead of selling as a flat rate to the entire church for unlimited access, we're going to break it down and also include and even break down our library into specific ministry areas, and then market just that ministry, essentially that ministry context, just to that one person. I'm not making sense.
What's a ministry area? What do you mean by that?
Youth ministry. So like the ministry to middle school and high school students, and the one person, the man or woman that's responsible for that ministry. To date, we've been marketing to the entire staff, and so as a group, they would have to make a decision on it, which group decisions never happen, right? Like, it's all it takes is one person to say, I don't think we need that for that decision to be gone. On the flip side, if we can talk to Joe Blow, youth pastor, and say, hey, Joe, this is a tool that you can sign up for yourself. You don't have to get any permission from anybody. It fits inside of your your budget for your department. You've got the credit card with the limit that you're allowed to use. You can just sign up and just train your own volunteers. And Joe is the one making the decision for it. Then that greatly simplifies how we can serve Joe. Instead of worrying about serving the entire church, Joe's church, we can say, well, we're going to serve Joe really well. And if Joe really likes it, maybe he'll pass it to Susie, who leads children ministry, or Sharon, who leads, the small group, Sunday school ministry. And so he might share it with us. Eventually we might serve the entire church, would be great. But at the very least, we can serve Joe really well and help him train his volunteers, which is really what our mission is as a company. So
I heard somebody say recently that it's really good to go like, a common mistake in online education or whatever is to not be niche enough. So you just broke it down, and then you broke it down again, and now you're breaking it down to like, okay, the youth pastor, this one's for the children, this one's for the teens. And so are you saying that they can actually, depending upon where they sit, like if they're in the teen group, there's going to be different pre-populated courses in there?
Yes. So once we finish this little transition, which we started yesterday, we will, when Joe, youth pastor, will be able to sign up and pay it'll be 40% of the cost. So it'll be, instead of $99 a month, it'll be $39 a month. and he will be able to have all of his own people in there, and he'll only see access to the library of content that's specific for his ministry. So it's only youth ministry content. Plus some of our general stuff. We have safety training that's applicable for across the board. We have, common use, general volunteering concepts, biblical concepts for volunteering in churches, kind of stuff that'll be accessible to him as well. But he won't get access to like the care ministry or the children's ministry or the greeters or whatever. He'll just have youth ministry stuff. Again, to help serve Joe really well, because we really want Joe to be successful in his training and volunteer training. If he's successful in his volunteer training with Trained Up, then Trained Up is successful.
That's really cool. That's really cool. So what else have you changed? Like, so what did you change in, like, for example, like in your Facebook ads?
So we're still in the middle of this. I mean, I wish I had better data. Maybe we can do another podcast in a couple of months and I'll tell you how it went.
All right.
And so what we're doing is we're still running our ads currently that are aiming at whole churches. So we still got tests running in that. So we don't want to mess with those tests. We still need a couple more weeks testing those. What we're going to do is we're also run a subset or another set of Facebook ads. Right now we're just doing Facebook ads, trying to keep the testing really simple. And we're going to aim those Facebook ads specifically at 3 ministry areas: youth, children, and small groups. And then each one of those ads is going to land on a landing page specifically for that youth, for that area of ministry. So Joe Blow is going to see an ad. Joe Blow, youth pastor, is going to see an ad for training your youth ministry volunteers. He clicks the ad. He lands on a page where it talks about training youth ministry volunteers with example videos of some of our training that we have for youth ministry volunteers, and then pricing specifically for youth ministry and a sign up form for youth ministry. And it's gonna, it's just him. It's like this blinders zeroed in, focus on just serving that guy. He'll never even see that there's children's ministry, other ministries. So
that's really cool. So, I mean, that's like that's textbook customer segmentation. Like, they got their own pricing. You're really speaking to the subgroups and going after that. That's really cool. Well, I can't wait to hear how all that works out. And let's shift gears a little bit to about where you are right now. Like, where are you? You're in the Caribbean or the Bahamas.
Technically, I'm not sure if it's technically Caribbean, but
what is the difference between the Caribbean and the Bahamas? Is it one?
I don't know. When people say that like they're sailing the Caribbean, they never say that they're in the Bahamas. It's always like just Virgin Islands or Puerto Rico or even further south. So
I gotcha. Well, how long have you been on the boat? How long have you? When did you leave? I know you were actually on the boat in dock for a while. Correct? We lived in St. Augustine, Florida for a while on the boat, and then we left in January, and we took about a month going down the coast to get our time, and then crossed over to the Bahamas in middle of February. So awesome.
So we've been here since February.
So you've been left the dock about 4 months ago. Is that right?
Yeah, I guess. Yep.
Yeah, that's awesome.
We haven't touched the dock since. We've been sitting on anchor ever since.
That's awesome. Well, when I first met you, I had actually just got off of like about 9 months in an RV. So we kind of share this passion for location independence and digital nomading, not just working from home, but like taking the home on the road or on the sea or whatever. Yeah. Tell me about it. How's it going for you? What's going well? Obviously it's great to be out and, on the ocean and in the sun and all that. What are some of the big highs and what are some of the challenges?
Yeah. So, I mean, the highs are anecdotal mostly. So 3 days ago, we were anchored a lot further south down, around a place called Little Harbor. It's real remote, and probably 2.5 hours from any kind of civilization. And I was working in the morning. Erica, my wife is Erica, and we have 2 boys, 3 and 5. They were about a quarter mile away or so on a beach. She had kind of put the boys on a paddle board and taken them to a beach. And so while I was working in the morning, I kind of hit a spot in my work day that I was like, oh, kind of done for now. I could, work some in the afternoon, but I'm kind of hit a stopping point. So I would say I put on like a bathing suit, but really I just jumped in the water and swam over to them and hung out on the beach with them. In the middle of the day, I left my phone, computer on the boat and went and for a swim, crystal clear blue waters,
living the dream.
saw a sea turtle as I was swimming and saw a couple of starfish and plenty of conch and then went back to the boat, ate lunch, and started working in the afternoon. So
that's awesome.
Got a little exercise, good quarter mile, half mile swim.
Yeah, that's the typical day stuff. And I know what you mean by the anecdotal. Like, I mean, it's just that those dream experiences, like just unique, great quality time with people you love, and being out there in nature, having no choice but to disconnect from technology and leave work behind, and be around all the other animals and other great things out there in the world. That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like this whole running an online business, whether that's, I mean, for us, it's kind of a software and content business, but a lot of content entrepreneurs are, have the same opportunities to be able to run a business that has no tie to any location, or even any kind of real schedule, like a set schedule. And so you can go where you want to go. For us, this is not everybody wants to live on a boat hot in the tropics, but living in a cabin, living on the road like you did in a trailer for what was it, 6 months, 9 months?
9 months, yeah.
9 months, yeah. And essentially to have the options laid out in front of you, what you want to do. Like our biggest problem now is with all the options in front of us, what do we do from here? Like do we?
It's a big world.
It's a big world. There's a lot of water in this world, and we live on a boat. And, so we got plans in the fall to travel up the East Coast, and we might make it to Maine.
Oh, that'd be cool. Yeah.
We actually do have plans to make it to Maine. Probably not this year, but maybe next year. It's a long trip up the coast. But at least go up the coast, to the Carolinas or whatever, and spend some time in some pretty, islands up there.
By the way, I'm from North Carolina, and over by the Intercoastal Waterway, by Wrightsville Beach. Maybe if you're in that neck of the woods, we could hook up over there too. So.
So there's Beaufort I want to go to, and Beaufort. I want to go to both places.
I used to go to summer camp as a kid around there. So yeah, I know that area. It's awesome.
Yeah. So yeah, we go there. I haven't seen Chris since last November, so it'll be cool. Anyway, so just the opportunity to do whatever, whenever, wherever, and the only tie down is to make sure that we're serving our customers well. So, and sometimes that means working a full day of work. Most of the time, it doesn't. Honestly, I don't work full days. I mean, like I know the age old or whatever the adage is, as an entrepreneur, you work way longer than normal hours. And I guess there's have been times when I've worked those long hours, but you don't have to be a slave to you don't have to be a slave to your business. You can organize and design your business to fit your lifestyle rather than kind of fitting your lifestyle around your business. So
what are some of the challenges? And I'll just roll off some of mine just from the RV story and some of the other various nomading things I've done. I've lived internationally with kids in Costa Rica and done different things. But, I mean, the trailer specifically is kind of small, so as I imagine a boat would be. Which is good, but it's sometimes you're like climbing over somebody just to get to the other side of the room. And so you got that, and
walking a gauntlet of toys along the ground.
Yeah, or just like you probably don't run into it as much in the water, but like trying to find a spot to park or camp or whatever, or anchor, and like for whatever reason you can't stay there, so you got to roll on. Kids are tired. It's not good timing. I don't know, those kind of things. Like it's not all puppy kisses and rainbows, as I like to say. But what are some of your challenges working from the road?
Well, I mean, for us, we have a boat with no air conditioning, and so we have the windows and doors open all the time. And then sometimes, like right now, it starts to rain. I don't know if you can see that. You probably can't see it, but it's raining pretty hard. And we have the doors and windows open, and so we're getting water inside the boat.
Okay. So what are some of the challenges business-wise? Like, do you ever have any, like, more just related to work? Not so much like family and work or location work, but, like, just being remote, and, like, what other business challenges do you experience as a digital nomad that, wouldn't be really an issue if you had an office somewhere or whatever?
Well, one is, consistent internet. So we're pretty remote out here. And I've got a pretty reliable system set up for my internet, but sometimes coverage isn't good. And so that can be a problem from time to time. Because of the way that our life is, my computer isn't always charged. Like we have to run a diesel generator to charge my computer. So that's tough. Sometimes I just have to work from my phone. We had to shift in how we did business with clients and how I interacted with clients. I used to do all of our demos. Now I do none of our demos because this isn't the most professional background for when you're talking to somebody about spending $100 a month on, training software.
Yeah.
I found somebody who's very professional. He's in fact much better than I am at it. So there's some trade-offs with that. One challenge, I guess, is we're in a small space, and so when I'm working and I'm having a meeting or I need to focus, then I have to find a place to get away from the kids because we're in a very small space.
Where are they right now?
They're all taking a nap in a aft cabin.
Okay.
But and that's a great thing. They take a nap in the middle of the day, so that helps. But like right now, like if I wanted to get off of, like if I were in a trailer, a travel trailer or something like that, I need to get away. I could just step out the door and go walk and find a nice quiet spot. Like here, I can't just step off and walk somewhere. You know, we're surrounded by water, and we have one way to get to shore. We have a little dinghy to get to shore. And so if I take the dinghy, then Erica to shore to get some like alone time. Erica's got no way to get to shore with the kids, and vice versa. So we have to there's some dancing that goes around about managing that. But I mean, it's you find a rhythm. It's it's worth it. So.
Yeah, that's cool. I like to sometimes if I share a story from that recent road trip, just being in Yosemite Falls or Yosemite National Park. I was sitting, you could see Yosemite Falls where I was, and it was beautiful. It was awesome. And I was running my business from there. But also at that same moment, we had something going on and I had to like pull one of those longer days. So here I am, like my wife and kids have gone off to the falls or whatever. I'm sitting in my car with the engine running to provide power to my laptop. I'm stealing Wi-Fi from the lodge, the main lodge at Yosemite, to like finish a marketing website. I can see Yosemite Falls out the window, but I'm not out there enjoying it. But I mean, I can't complain, It's just I'm just saying it's not always great, It's not always perfect, but
yeah.
On the end or the net, in my opinion and in my experience, it's a great thing to do. And if you like traveling and like exploring and nothing helps you bond as a family and get to know each other's quirks than living on a small space together. So
that's true. We say small homes build tight-knit families. So
yeah, they do.
That's what we say.
They do. Well, Scott, I want to thank you for coming on the show again. And for those of you listening, you can find out more at trainedup.church. That's where Scott is at. Where else can people find and connect with you on the internet?
Really just Twitter. I don't really do anything other than Twitter. So Twitter is, I guess Twitter and Instagram. So Twitter is Scott Magdalein and Instagram is Scott Magdalein. And I guess the spelling of Magdalein, they can find probably somewhere written because Magdaleine's kind of hard to spell. But it's on Twitter, I mostly tweet about like church training stuff. And then on Instagram, we just tweet our life and on boat. So it's a little bit more scenic on Instagram.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on the show and sharing your journey as an education entrepreneur and teaching some valuable lessons about knowing your customer and figuring out how to position and talk to them and segment your marketing and things like that. That's really a goldmine of experience you shared. And also thank you for sharing your story and what you're up to and sharing that with us as well.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on again, man.
All right.